Hello, and thank you for coming to today's OCPL Genealogy Group, O Canada, Tracing Your Canadian Roots. I'm Kate Kisselstein, the Junior Librarian in the Local History and Genealogy Department at Onondaga County Public Library's Central Library. And I'm joined today by my co-host, Celeste Moore. She's the branch manager at OCPL's Payne Branch Library. As always, there will be time for questions at the end. We'll start off today's program by going over some of the records you can find online at the Library and Archives Canada, which is also known as the Bibliothèque et Archives Canada. So while here we'll use the acronym LAC, you may also see its French equivalent BAC. First up will be the Canadian Census records and their alternatives, including a peek into the newly released 1931 Census of Canada. Next will be an overview of the types of immigration records held by the LAC, followed by an overview of its citizenship and naturalization databases. We will then cover some of the titles available at Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department, as well as other resources available through Onondaga County Public Libraries and your own library. So the Library and Archives Canada Census records, they have several holdings of early census and census-related documents. The related documents include military censuses, lists of property owners, population totals, and tax assessment rolls. Note that these early records do not necessarily contain all names, and many are incomplete, but all are a good resource if you can trace Canadian ancestors back to the 17th and 18th centuries in particular. The province with the earliest holdings is Quebec, starting in 1640, and the provinces with the latest holdings are Newfoundland and Labrador, which go to 1945. Next, we have the pre-Confederation censuses, which fall between 1825 and 1861. Prior to 1867, enumeration took place at different times for different areas. Unfortunately, not many have survived, but those that did have been digitized and made available by the LAC. Note, however, that these early censuses usually only counted heads of households, typically the senior male inhabitant. Another set of records available through the LAC are the censuses of the prairie provinces, with the earliest being the 1870 census that was taken for Manitoba after it joined the Confederation. Due to the rapid population growth in these provinces during the early 1900s, it was decided to take an additional census starting in 1906, then every 10 years thereafter, alternating with the national censuses. Newfoundland and Labrador censuses are in a separate category at the LAC. It's important to note that while some early records exist for Newfoundland, the earliest dates to 1671, that it wasn't included in the censuses of Canada for 1851 to 1931, as it wasn't a province until 1949. Labrador, however, was counted in the 1871 Census of Canada under Quebec as Labrador District, and then again in the 1911 Census of Canada under the Northwest Territories as Labrador Subdistrict. The censuses taken in Newfoundland in 1921, 1935, and 1945 are still in the process of being indexed, and the completed indexes are searchable online on the Newfoundland Grand Banks genealogy site. The Census of Canada is perhaps one of the most popular archives at the LAC, given that it currently has indexed versions of records from 1871 to 1921, and the most recently released 1931 is in the process of being indexed. Note that not all provinces and territories were included in the 1871 and 1881 censuses. While a portion of these are due to the date they joined the Dominion of Canada, some may have been a district or subdistrict of an earlier province. And this leads us to the most recently released census, the 1931 Census of Canada. Given that the United States recently released the 1950 federal census, you'd think that Canada's release of their 1931 census wouldn't be a big deal. but it's only the 7th census to have been released since the Confederation of Canada in 1867. And it's the first time the LAC has been able to provide online access to a census on the first day permitted by law. In this case, June 1st, 2023, or 92 years after the date of the census was taken. There are details on the lives of nearly 10.4 million people, including William Shatner, who was born early in 1931, on over 234,687 imaged pages. While it's true that currently you can only browse the 1931 census by subdistrict, it's being indexed and verified by LAC's Ancestry and Family Search International partners. So, what can you expect from this browsable version of the 1931 census? Only Schedule 1, the population schedule, was preserved, as is the case for all past censuses. Among the details available on this census are the answers to 2 new questions. Does the family own a radio? And if this person was unemployed, what was the cause? When browsing the 1931 Census of Canada, it's important to note that not all subdistrict names or boundaries for 1931 match those of the 1921 census. And I did try and look up William Shatner, and there's 24 subdistricts that he could be in. It was a little bit intimidating. Once the verified index is complete later this year, you'll be able to search the records on the LAC's aggregate census search, which allows you to search all index census and census-related records, starting with the 1825 Lower Canada census records up to the 1926 Prairie census records. The census search allows you to choose which years to search and allows for searching not just by name, age, and gender, but also ethnicity, birth country, religion, and occupation, as well as the district, subdistrict, and division. So another set of records available through the LAC website is immigration records. The first is passenger lists to 1935, with the majority of passenger lists dating from 1865 to 1935. That said, the LAC does have some holdings of passenger lists from before 1865, notably passenger lists for the French regime from 1608 to 1760, and those for the British regime from 1760 to 1865. The passenger lists from 1865 to 1922 are searchable by name, plus year or date of arrival, and by ship's name. The passenger lists and border entries 1925 to 1935 were from handwritten documents. So as some of the original documents are very difficult to read, some information in the database may be incorrect and or incomplete. The manifest indexes cover the period from March 1st, 1906 to December 1920. Starting in 1906, immigration staff began indexing, which means standardizing the information, the names found in the passenger lists. Instead of making a master index, they indexed each passenger list separately. These are the manifest indexes. Poor legibility or gaps in surviving passenger lists make them unreliable. The manifest indexes are sometimes the only way to find an immigrant's arrival information. The indexes are arranged by date of arrival rather than by port. Some of the lists are not in exact date sequence. The indexes include the ports of Quebec, Halifax, and St. John. The next group of immigration records deals with border entry records, 1908 to 1935. Note that there are none before 1908. The 2 main types you will find are border entry lists from 1908 to 1918 and 1925 to 1935. The interim years of 1919 to 1924 are covered by individual Form 30 records. In 1908, the Government of Canada started recording border arrivals on border entry lists, which were the official record of immigration. There are no immigrant applications or files. The lists are arranged by border port and date of entry. The border entry lists for 1908 to 1918 archived have been digitized, and the images can be viewed in digitized microforms archived. The lists are arranged by border port and date of entry. If you do not know those details, consult the immigration indexes and research aids page for nominal indexes. Once you have the complete reference, the border entry lists can be consulted in digitized microforms archive. The border entry lists that include surnames starting with the letter C have been indexed in the passenger lists 1925 to 1935 nominal indexes. From January 1st, 1919 to December 31st, 1924, the Department of Immigration and Colonization required that individual forms, the Form 30, be completed and submitted to immigration officers at border ports. Instead of the large sheet border entry lists previously in use, a form was submitted for each individual, including children and some returning Canadians. However, the names of accompanying dependents were sometimes listed on the back of the head of households form. Note, the United States National Archives and Records Administration holds records of arrivals from Canada 1895 to 1954. This is also known as the St. Albans list. Those records include Canadians traveling to the U.S. to visit or work. Note that the NARA has microfilm holdings, but the list is available online through Family Search as well. For immigration that occurred after 1935, the records are held by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, and copies of these records are not available through the LAC. Library and Archives Canada holds records relating to citizenship. They are indexed and digitized in these databases. Citizenship registration records, 1851 to 1945, Montreal Circuit Court. This database contains information about immigrants who applied for citizenship in the city and district of Montreal from 1851 to 1945. Most of the documents are from 1868 to 1916. Naturalization lists, 1915 to 1951. As required by the Naturalization Act of 1914 and later acts, the Government of Canada published lists of people naturalized from 1915 to 1951. The lists appeared in the following publications: annual reports or session papers of the Department of the Secretary of State, the Canada Gazette, which is the official publication that reports weekly on the activities of the Government of Canada. Naturalization records, 1828 to 1850, for Upper Canada and Canada West. This database provides access to 2,967 references to the Upper Canada and Canada West naturalization registers held at the Library and Archives Canada. And now we come to select titles in local history and genealogy at Central Library. We have periodicals, including American Canadian Genealogist, the official journal of the American Canadian Genealogical Society, Je me souviens from the American French Genealogical Society, Canadian Genealogist, Lost in Canada, which is the Canadian American Journal of History and Genealogy for Canadian, French, and Métis study, and the Loyalist Gazette from the Dominion Council of the United Empire Loyalists Association of Canada. Central Library's Local History and Genealogy Department has several rows of shelves, as you can see, devoted to family genealogies, both published and in manuscript form, as well as collections from lineage societies. The regional history holdings can help you to better get a feel of where and when your ancestors lived. Among our most recent acquisitions related to today's topic is the title Before the King's Daughters, The Filles à Marier by Peter Gagné. It details the life of the French women who made their own way over to New France and helped to settle the land, paving the way for the Filles du Roi who would come later. The title is a treasure trove of information on a previously little known segment of early French Canadian settlers. And I will turn this actually over to Celeste. Oh, Celeste, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some other resources. I'm going to primarily focus on resources that are free that you can access either through the library or online. Oops. Let's see. Hold on just a second. I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, okay. So I need to stop.
Unless you want to, do you want to continue? And then I'll just, I'll
Oh,
just let you
I can continue then. Yeah.
do that. So let
Okay,
me,
so next slide.
yes, please.
There we
Okay, so these are some things that I'm going to talk about in my portion of the workshop today. So Family Search is a website that we've talked about previously, and you can also do Canadian research there for your genealogy. The OCPL and many libraries offer Ancestry, the library edition. It's a free version of Ancestry. You're not able to do like messaging and family tree work with that, but it's available. You can get to a lot of records with that library subscription. Canadiana is another resource. It's a website. The Canadian government has worked to digitize resources, and it's a good resource for genealogists. There's also several genealogical societies that you can look into, both in Canada and in the US, that have ties to Canadian genealogy. Also going to talk a little bit about Facebook groups. If you are looking for a particular region in Canada for your genealogy research, there are lots of Facebook groups that focus in on different regions and ethnic backgrounds, that type of thing, that are really good resources to look into. Also, translating and understanding the text. The old script is important. And I'm also going to touch a little bit on First Nations. So if you do have Indigenous family members, how to start to find information on that type of research. Okay, Kate. Okay, so Family Search. Family Search is a website that you can sign up for basic access. It is free. You can also go to Local History, and that has the status of an affiliate library. So they have a next tier of access to the records. There's Family Search Center, which is in Liverpool. They do have limited hours. And then also there's the Family Search Library, which is located in Salt Lake City. But you can access quite a bit of things free and start your Canadian research with Family Search. Okay, Kate. So a Family Search has indexes, and they also have images of the Canadian records. Okay, Kate. So some things that you're going to find are you're going to find information on birth. You're going to find baptismal records, marriage. You can find death and burial records, census information, and like Kate was also talking about, immigration, and some information on occupations. This is just some of the stuff that you'll see in Family Search. Okay, Kate. So one way that you can, there's different ways that you can get to this information, but if you go to the Family Search website and you go to the search feature and you click on that, okay, Kate. From there, you can go to records, and then from there, you can see at the bottom right-hand side, it's search by place. So when you start typing in there, if you start typing Canada, it'll come up with other options for you. Okay, Kate. So you can search by Canada, and then it also gives you province areas that you can search by. So for my search, I actually did Quebec ancestor, and I looked, just did a quick search just to show you. So this is some of the information that I came up with here. It gives you information about the records that are available. Some you can actually see, some you can go into the actual image of the record. So that is that. Family Search also has another really helpful research tool, if you will, and that is the wiki. I know we've talked about Family Search wikis in the past. Here you'll find a guided research tool for your Canadian research. They also have an interactive map where you can search by area within Canada. And then they also have a section where you can also submit questions. You know, you can ask the community on that Canadian Wiki questions, and then they can help to point you in the right direction. So those are all good resources for you to look at. Okay, Kate. So vital records in Quebec are, the older ones are, of course, they're going to be your church records, later on, civil records. So again, birth information you're going to find in baptismal records, marriage, and then death or burial records, and then these other types of records that Kate talked about with census, and then also some military records. Okay, Kate. And this is a portion of the page that's really helpful. It goes by, so if you're looking for birth informations for Canada, this tells you different areas that you can go to, different resources. And it also tells you if it's paid or if it's a free, free access, which is helpful. Okay, Kate. This is the portion of the wiki that I talked about a little earlier, and this is that interactive map. So it's good, if you have relatives that were from Quebec, you can also see Ontario. I have some relatives that were in both areas. So you just click on that portion of the map, and then it starts to bring you to those records that you can search. Okay, Kate. This is that, the family search. It's not on the same line, but this is that community. You can reach out to them and you can actually ask questions and things like that. So again, very helpful. This is the Canadiana website, and this is actually an initiative by the Canadian government to digitize information. There are historical publications. You're also going to find some newspapers. There's some books that are also on there. So it's worth a try to look at that and see what type of information you can find. If you find any information that's helpful in your family research, or researching the historical period for your ancestors. Okay, Kate. And this is what the website looks like. And they have a French, and then they also have an English version, which is helpful for us researchers like myself who are not fluent in French. Okay. So this is Ancestry Library Edition. I know a lot of you may subscribe to the ancestry.com version, but this is available through the library. And available through many different library systems, I believe. So OCPL has in library use only. Again, it's available at Local History. You can come to any of the city branches also. I believe many of the member libraries also. You can search for the records for free. Again, it's not a subscription base for the people using it. So personal family trees and private messages are restricted with this version. Okay. I just did a search in this Ancestry Library Edition for an ancestor and found them quite quickly. Again, it's a Quebec record, and it was a marriage record. And from there, it also links to other people that are mentioned in the record. I think you'll find, particularly with the French Canadian records, that they're the older records are mostly sacramental records, so they're very there's a lot of information that's included in there. You'll see parent information. If it's a baptismal record, you'll see for marriage records, same things. You'll see spouse information. You'll see parental information. For baptismal, it'll also give information about godparents, which a lot of times I've found are also family members or close neighbors that eventually seem to marry into the family. So that's that. Okay, Kate. This is the actual record. So one thing that I like about the Ancestry is that you can actually go into the record. So it does do a transcription, if you will, and then it also does allow you to go into the record to see a little bit more information. Sometimes the name is transcribed a little different, so you're going to have to sometimes hone your search to find the best result. But this is their actual marriage record, which is pretty interesting to read. Okay. All right, Kate. Genealogical societies. I know we've talked about them in the past, and in Canada, there's quite a few of them. There's also a lot of American genealogy societies that have Canadian ties. Some are Quebec. So why is it important to look at genealogical societies? So these people are really focused in on this type of research. You can network. Sometimes they have resources, workshops, and that type of thing that you can learn and expand your genealogical knowledge. Okay, Kate. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this is just some sites that you can go to, and it gives quite a few different Canadian genealogical societies. So one is, again, the Library and the Archives for Canada that Kate mentioned earlier. They have a page that actually goes into the societies that you can contact or look into their information. Cindy's list also has a pretty extensive list for Canadian societies and groups. And there's also quite a few examples of American Canadian genealogical societies. There's American French Genealogical Society, the Northern New York American Canadian Genealogical Society, French Canadian Genealogical Society. You also have the American Canadian Genealogical Society. And there's several other ones. I think you'll also find that there's an awful lot that are in Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, that type of thing. Also, the American Canadian Genealogical Society also has a journal. So I provided a link to that here. Okay, Kate. So these are some examples from my own use with Facebook groups. That's another resource that maybe you'll find helpful. So I belong to the Quebec Family History Society, and then the French Canadian Ancestry Facebook group. And a lot of times researchers will submit a record with an old script that maybe they're not able to read, or French isn't their language that they're proficient in. They might submit something, and then a lot of times they'll translate or they'll help. It seems to be another pretty useful group. They also provide a lot of historical information and that type of thing. Sometimes there's different workshops and different meetings and things like that you could also attend or be part of. Okay. So if you go to facebook.com, you can actually search for Facebook groups. And so if you're interested in, Ontario genealogy or Quebec genealogy, or if you just want to search Canadian genealogy, you'll find different Facebook groups, and then from there you can see a lot of them will require you to for the ones that I joined, you had to answer some questions. What were maybe some family names that are part of your research and your genealogy, or that type of thing. I think some of that's just to make sure you're not a robot and that you're actually interested in that particular genealogy research. Okay, Kate. So when you're looking at the script, and then also if you have records that are in a different language, Family Search has some other information that is pretty helpful. There is a word list on that. Kate, if you go to the next screen. This is for the French genealogical research. There's a word list, and that's pretty helpful for someone starting French Canadian genealogy or French genealogy. Okay, Kate. Google Translate is another way that you can, I know we've talked about that in the past. I know at least some of you have used that. I have used that also in the past. It's a helpful resource. Okay, Kate. And then Brigham Young University also has a tutorial in how to make sense of old handwriting styles. So they have it for French, they have it for Latin, they have it for different languages. That's worth looking into if you have any ancestors that their records may be in an old handwriting style and in a different language. Okay. I'm also just going to touch base a little bit on the DIT or DITE records for the French Canadians. That's a way that they, it's an alias or called or known by, you could say, and it's usually added to their last name. Sometimes it's a place, sometimes it's a description, sometimes it might be even an occupation, but it's a way that you can isolate them in your research. So that's something to look into if you do have French Canadian ancestry. I believe that in France, I think in Belgium also, they use those type of features. Okay, Kate. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this, this type of naming, these are some links that actually you can go and read a little bit more, and it tells you in more detail about this. Okay, Kate. I also wanted to talk a little bit about First Nations. Some of you may in your research find that you have Indigenous relatives, and there are some good resources to start off to help you with your research. So the Library and Archives of Canada also has a very interesting webpage that can help you start your research. Family Search also has a wiki, again, to help with First Nations research. And then Morris Institute Library also has a LibGuide, which I found quite extensive and helpful. And Kate, if we go to the next page, this is just a screenshot of the first portion of the page for that LibGuide. And again, it's going to connect you to a lot of different resources that can help you better understand researching Indigenous ancestors. So that's